when we study this, as I'm talking about it, sometimes you tend to look at, okay, what's the difference between complexity and risk, for example, right? Some people think that way, even myself. Complexity is completely different from risk.
So
Risk,
I actually do understand the difference between complexity and risk.
okay, can you
For
share
me,
that?
what I understand you saying is that complexity is like problem solving, like anticipating all the factors that might impact the project.
Exactly.
That's both positive and negative, so that
Yeah,
you are prepared with contingencies that might help you to address them as they occur. While for risk, it's just about the negative impact that things can have, like what could possibly be a risk, what could challenge you executing at the capacity and value or quality that you're looking into. So it's totally different because one is just to give you a broader, so you're not taken by surprise. What could
mhm,
happen? You are looking at all the possible loopholes. What's the positive that could happen? What are the external factors that don't have anything to do with you that might impact the project that you're trying to work on? While risk is just looking at the negative impacts of things like policies, individual human resources, like you talked about weather. Weather could be a contingent, it could be a risk factor. It could also be, on the other side. But there are several things that overlap. So, like you said, I see where there's confusion, but
yeah.
I personally don't understand the difference between both.
All right. Thank you. All right. That makes it easier. So basically, just like you've said, risk itself, we can risk as risk is risk, they are also still predictable. They are basically predictable elements that you can actually sit down to analyze and evaluate them and see where risk poses opportunity for you to maximize value or a threat in order to destabilize whatever you are trying to achieve. So to maximize the positive impact, but risk also could have positive impact. It could also have negative impact. So our responsibility is to maximize the opportunities of the positive impact and to minimize the impact of, to mitigate the negative impact that may comes through risk. So as a project manager, our attitude to risk should be that of being proactive, right? We're expected to be as proactive as possible, that to identify risk, analyze them, and come up with mitigation plan in order to address them. So individual and overall risk, they can impact, of course, risk will impact projects. It can be positive, it can be negative. They are analyzed continually throughout the life cycle of the project. In fact, questions will come to test that, okay, at what point risk came during the closing of a project. Closing of a project is when project is ending. What should the project manager do? Even at that closing time, if a risk come up, you must still try to analyze the impact of it and see how to mitigate it, the impact. So it's basically, risk is something that the project manager keep an eye on throughout the life cycle of the project. And an organizational risk attitude, risk appetite, and threshold influence how risk is addressed. So organization that has, let's say you are having an event in Eagle Square where in the bowl of the Eagle Square in Abuja here, for example, or in an environment, in an open heavens. Yeah, let me just use that. That is not in a hall. Yeah, you plan that, okay, your wedding is going to be in an open place where you guys can have fun, your guests can have fun and all of that. But then your budget is maybe ₦1 million, and then you can't rent canopy. So now your risk appetite or your threshold in that context is very limited, because you cannot tolerate that. You can't do that in June, because if it rain, your whole plan will be scattered. As against somebody who has the resources that, okay, if it start raining now, they can ask for a tent to be quickly brought so that guests will not be drenched in the rain. So both the resources the organization has and their strength, their staff strength, their whatever, all the resources that organization has is what define your attitude to risk, the appetite, and also the threshold that uh, you can take or that you can address. So that if you are planning risk mitigation, you are going to plan it with reference to organizational strengths, organizational resources, organizational ability, and of course, the project's budget and all the resources that the project has. So risk response should be appropriate for the significance of the risk, cost-effective, realistic within the project context, agreed by stakeholder, and it must be owned by a responsible person. But most important of them all that is not written here is that we must be proactive in addressing risk. And it can happen at at every point in the life of a project. Okay.